Now, here's your host, Christian apologist, Bob Siegel.
And this is Bob Siegel. So, you'd like to believe in God, but you wonder, do Christians really care about making the world a better place? Do they really care about peace on earth, or do they instead throw up their hands and await the second coming of Christ? Well, my friend, there will be a second coming of Christ, but nobody knows when. Could be 10 years from now, could be 1,000 years from now. So the command given to Christians in the meantime is to absolutely strive to make the world a better place. One giant step toward this aim would be a denuclearized North Korea. Now, some are saying that if things work out with North Korea, Donald Trump should be given the Nobel Peace Prize. Don't hold your breath. Admitting an accomplishment of Donald Trump's just isn't politically correct. They wouldn't give Trump that award if he cured cancer and AIDS on the same day. There's a greater chance that the award would go to Kim Jong-un. To win such a prestigious honor, one either has to be a lying terrorist like Yasser Arafat, who did win, or follow the lead of President Obama and receive the award for doing absolutely nothing. And now let me introduce a man who deserves an award in his own right. Unfortunately, there are no prizes for being a cool guy. Say hello to co-host Jim Berrier.
Well, I'm going to take that. I'll just take your opinion, and that it matters more to me than most of the awards. You know,
I'll say this: it's having more credibility than the Nobel Prize, so that's something.
You know, now, again, you know, I'm more of a sports guy than you. But the Nobel Prize, to me, the things you referred to earlier, has about as much meaning as the Heisman Trophy does in college football. Ever since they gave the award one year to one Gino Torretta, quarterback in Miami, and they should have given it to Marshall Faulk, who went to San Diego State and broke all kinds of records and was the greatest running back in the country. And Marshall went on to have a great career and win a Super Bowl. Gino Torretta didn't last but about a year because he was terrible, but they gave him the Heisman Trophy. And after that, the Heisman Trophy meant nothing. And after a couple of the people that you mentioned there who received the Nobel Prize, it lost its meaning to me, particularly one you mentioned that did absolutely nothing. Yeah. I don't even know why they gave it to the guy.
Well, unfortunately, for the rest of Obama's career in office, he did a lot of things. They were horrible things, but they don't take back Nobel Prizes, do they? I don't think they do. And then, of course, O.J. won the Heisman also, but didn't do much to straighten his life out.
Yeah. Well, he was a great running back in college and in the pros. But, you know, as many of it's been tough for me in my life because he was at one time one of my favorite sports figures, and one of my, if not the all-time favorite comedian was one Bill Cosby. And
Isn't that sad? I so much wanted to believe that this was all being made up, and I suppose it's still possible that it is, but it certainly doesn't look that way.
Doesn't look like it. And the truth is, here's a celebrity, an African-American, as we have to say, and you would think he would get every benefit of the doubt.
Who was popular ahead of his time. He was one of the first African-Americans to be in a regular show. Back when he was doing comedy albums, he also starred with Robert Culp in I Spy. Great show. Yeah. And a great tennis player he was. He did his own tennis there. But, and I loved him. He was funny. I still think his stuff was funny. But, his stuff is ingenious, but now nobody will listen to it anymore, which I guess is sad because it was genius in its own right.
Won't.
But, it would be hard to listen to it and enjoy it, knowing all the things that happened.
Especially because so much of it had to do with family and everything. So I don't think I could because it would just keep stirring up those wounds.
Yeah, a few years ago, right on this show, we played some of the pieces from Noah. It was hilarious.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he's hilarious. And, as long as we're on that subject, because, folks, when I'm on the Bob Siegel Show, we just jump on rabbit trails and go wherever they lead.
The Wiley Wascally Wabbit Trails.
How come they haven't retroactively disciplined Hillary's husband? Remember him?
Oh, yeah.
Was that guy not? Was he not? He was a worse
because of the Clintons. The Clintons are Teflon. They get away with everything. All this collusion with Russia was coming from the Clintons. God. Well, and Obama too, but I really don't think anything's going to happen to any of them.
No. They'll get away with it. But, and then on the other hand, so those people are golden. They're protected. They're the darlings. But then you get this thing. Now, your state, by the way, Bob, the state you live in, is just absolutely gone nuts.
The state of confusion has become a better state than California. What's
up with this professor up in Fresno that the day after Barbara Bush dies calls her a racist and a murderer? How do you get away with that?
Yeah, and evidently they can't fire her because she has tenure or something like that.
I don't care how many years she has. That's an old...
I remember when I was a little kid, I always thought tenure meant you've been there for 10 years.
There's actually a story. The San Diego Padres had a great player named Tony Gwynn, and for a couple of years there was a guy named Ricky Henderson who was a great ball player, and he was on the team, and he got on the bus one time, and he started heading to the back, and Tony said, Ricky, you can sit up front, you've got tenure. And he says, Ricky got more than 10 years. Ricky got 20 years. He was serious. Hey,
my friend, you're always ragging on California, and we deserve it. So I'm not saying that's inappropriate at all. However, I can't resist because I heard this in the news today, and this is from the University of Texas. That's supposed to be the smarter red state. And they're claiming there that masculinity is a mental disorder. Now, unfortunately, I had to get to church, and I did not hear a whole lot of details of the story. Has this one come your way? Is there any more you can tell us about this?
I've been super busy. I'm going to tell you why in a few minutes. But no, I don't know that. But I'm going to tell you, living here, and I'm only an hour from that campus, because I live on the north side.
What city is that campus in? Is that a Houston?
Austin.
Austin.
Which is
Austin is more. Austin's kind of the California embassy to Texas. Isn't it?
It's the blue dot in the red state. For the time I moved here, I started going to Austin, and it's bicycles and bean sprouts and dreadlocks and.
Okay, well that explains things. Then it was a little bizarre. If it came out of Houston, that explains it.
Well, my theory, and if I were teaching history, I would rewrite history and tell the students that 150 years ago, California and Texas made a trade, and Texas got Austin from California, and California got Bakersfield from Texas. So.
I still think Lex Luthor has the best solution for California.
Well, he might be right, but then Larry Norman once said in a song, when the big one hit, that suddenly California floated in the breeze and everything that wasn't sank down into the seas. Who knows? But, you guys, by the way, I do want to also, instead of being so negative all the time, I do want to commend your city council. I believe they voted 3-1 to side with the federal government rather than Governor Moonbeam.
They are. There is a lot of interesting stuff brewing out here, and there are a lot of cities revolting. Now, unfortunately... While I appreciate them revolting on the illegal immigration issue, I don't know if you've been following Sacramento, but there's a far more important issue that could be curtailing free speech. And that is a bill where it would open people up to lawsuits if they give reparative therapy to people with homosexual tendencies.
I read about that.
And it's not just a therapist. It could be selling a book. This could actually make the Bible illegal. In Canada, on certain radio shows, there are certain passages of Scripture like Romans 1 that they're already not allowed to read. And if folks don't think we're going down that exact same path, if they don't understand that the militant gay agenda is planning to take us on exactly that same track, they're very naive. So I'm more concerned. I wish our cities were revolting over this one because, frankly, this one's more important.
Well... But that's, that one doesn't affect the economy in most people's minds. It does.
Well, and it's good to see a pushback against Sacramento no matter what it is. So I'll take what I can get. I'm still hoping we just split into 2 states.
I think that'd be hilarious. And you said, asked if I was following Sacramento. Bob, when I lived in California, I didn't follow Sacramento.
Unfortunately, it's unavoidable. You didn't think anything could be nuttier than Washington, but compared to Sacramento, Washington is the Emerald City of Oz.
Yeah, you got some goofy people out there, and of course, I was one of them. I lived there. I'm a third-generation San Diego native. I don't know if you knew that. So I have deep, deep roots there.
I knew you grew up here. I didn't know about the third generation stuff.
That's pretty rare for someone my age. And my great-grandson, that's how old I am, is a sixth-generation San Diego native. I'll bet you couldn't find 20 of those.
Well, Jim, you and I make a good team. We have an ex-California and somebody who's desperately wanting to become an ex-Californian and move to Texas.
Yeah, you and several million others. But
no kidding.
But, if you think the immigration thing's tough at the Mexican border, Texans don't want any more Californians. They're going to put up armed guards.
Well, I don't blame them because a lot of the liberals leave It's not just conservative leaving California. A lot of the liberals see what's happening to their jobs and their taxes. Yeah. So what do? They go to Texas, and then after escaping California, they try to turn Texas into another California, the morons.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot more of them have gone to Oregon, Washington, and Colorado. And of course, they're happier up there because they can buy dope. So, we haven't legalized that yet in Texas.
Dopes for dopes. We used to have a sign, a bumper sticker in San Diego. Maybe you need to adopt it in Texas. It said, "Welcome to San Diego. Enjoy your stay for a few weeks and then leave."
Yeah. We say, San Antonio is actually a pretty big destination city. We just had the NCAA Final Four here, and almost 100,000 people came into the city for that weekend, which is funny because the arena only holds 70,000. So there's 20,000 or more people just wandering the streets, and then we just had a PGA event here, the Valero Open. So it is a big destination city. So my thing is, I always say, welcome to San Antonio. Have a good time. Leave all your money here, but leave. Same thing.
There you go.
We're just in the introduction here, and I'm expecting to hear music any second now.
Well, you're getting to know the rhythm of this show pretty well. Tim's in there smiling like, boy, did he nail that one.
Well, I'm an old radio personality myself, and that's how we met. But
on Resistance Radio in San Antonio?
Resistance Radio.
Okay. Well, as we're going out, do you recognize the music? Okay, I'll let you think about it. You can tell us when we come back. You're listening to The Bob Siegel Show. Welcome back to 1170 The Answer. I'm your host, Bob Siegel. Say hello again to co-host Jim Berrier.
Hey, it's good to be here. That was Piano Man by Billy Joel.
I've kind of distinguished myself by playing the musical interludes of all these old 60 songs, but not the lyrics themselves.
By the way, how many years have you been doing this particular show on KCBQ?
I have been doing this particular show since January of 2005.
Wow.
And it feels like it was just yesterday. That's how fast time is going by.
Yeah.
Hopefully the time doesn't feel like it's going by slowly during the hour people are listening to the show. But
no,
it sure seems to go by fast over the years.
How could they not be entertained? I'm just thinking,
we've got it all. We got religion, politics, all the forbidden dinner table conversations.
We do. We've got it all.
Music, comedy, it's all right here.
Yeah.
It's like the Smothers Brothers. Well, I shouldn't jinx them. I don't want to hear some scandal about them, too.
Well,
all our favorites growing up are falling by the wayside.
I know what it was. It was that Dickie smoked Crayolas out behind the house.
That's right. Mom always liked you best.
Mom always liked you best.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to go back to, some of your opening stuff, because I did want to talk about all of this with the president. And I agree. There's no way in the world they will ever award him anything significant. But I have to think that he has had something to do with – I can't remember in my lifetime the leaders of North and South Korea smiling and shaking hands and, acting like two stepbrothers that made up after they've been fighting their whole lives, And I do think that he's had an influence in that. And
well, his tough talk may have just been a little more effective than Bill Clinton paying them $5 billion to not build nukes, and then they build the nukes anyway. Boy, that was money well spent.
Now, I'm about to say something that for some of our listeners, this will be sacrilegious, comparing our current president to a president we had once that on his inauguration day, terrorists released their hostages. And in his administration, the Berlin Wall came down. And I certainly can't compare the two guys on most levels. They were already celebrities before they took office and all of that. But there's something about, I think, a dynamic with some of the foreign powers that are a bit adversarial with us, thinking, you know what, this guy means business, and we might not want to mess with him. And
well,
I think there's a little bit of that.
It's peace through strength. And, they were saying the same things about Reagan. He's an idiot. He's a warmonger. Now, Reagan, like Trump, was blunt, but unlike Trump, Trump wrote the book on it. Reagan, for want of a better word, still sounded presidential, which has never mattered to me. I hate that term, sounding presidential. I find it refreshing that Trump just talks, say what's on everybody's mind anyway. We don't agree with everything he says, and he thinks out loud. He probably regrets a lot of the words even as they come out of his mouth. But compared to these politicians that have 20 handlers, and you can't say this or you'll offend her, and you can't say that or you'll offend them, I find it so refreshing, and I think it may just be the double axe we need to get rid of all this political correctness that is strangling our country. Yeah, I don't know what it's going to take for that to happen, but I think we've at least slowed things down a little bit with his becoming president, because he certainly is not worried about being politically correct. I'm thinking guys like Teddy Roosevelt and maybe even Harry Truman would not have fared well in the information age when everything is scrutinized and everything is immediately on the World Wide Web and all of that. Those guys were also a little colorful, and they also spoke their minds and stuff. But in this day and age, it's just so easy to attract criticism. And back to Uncle Ron. I loved Uncle Ron. Reagan was great. Yeah. He was my favorite president in my lifetime, and I was born while Truman was president, though I don't remember anything about him. But he had this great ability to be tactful, and he handled the media like nobody I ever saw. Tact is not quite Trump's middle name. No, not at all. So that was a huge difference between those guys. But, I'm looking at stuff, I'm thinking, it seems to me the economy is better. It seems to me unemployment is down. It seems to me that some of the knuckleheads that are out there that are a big threat are being more cautious. And it seems to me that some of the extremist factions in the Middle East are really struggling. And I just think that he's getting a lot of stuff done, but there's nobody. Maybe Fox News, maybe the One News America or whatever it is. There's a couple of conservative things out there, and they may give them a little bit of credit for things, but for the most part, even the Republicans up there, the idiots, they won't even back the guy up. The Republicans are his worst enemies. Yeah, and so I the guy's abrasive, and I think he's a bit of I can't say those words on the radio, but he has a past. He has some stuff. It seems pretty obvious that he fooled around and he's had these things, which of course didn't taint Clinton's. Well, isn't it interesting that when they had all those scandals about Clinton, the lecture we got was that it's just all about sex, and that what does that have to do with being president? The thing is, with Clinton, it was going on while he was president, and the problem people had was that he lied under oath, not necessarily that he'd had an affair. I mean, as moral people, we should have a problem with that too. But I would agree that we can compartmentalize this and say, what the heck does this have to do with being president? Jimmy Carter was a born-again Christian president. He was one of the worst presidents we ever had. The reason those hostages from Iran were released the day of Reagan's inauguration, as you brought up, was because they knew that the spineless Jimmy Carter was about to retire and they couldn't push America around anymore. I'm going to make a prediction, though. You know how they always say success has 1,000 fathers, failure none. Oh, even liberals talk positively about Reagan now. But in his day, he was very unpopular with the liberals. I believe the day's going to come where Trump just may be viewed as a hero, but usually heroes in their own time, in their own day, are under a lot of criticism because they are standing out from the crowd. I think of Martin Luther, to bring it back to religion. Martin Luther in Germany, he was blunt. He talked the street language. And they didn't have tweets in his day, but the printing press was invented in his day. That was the second greatest information exchange in history, the internet being the third. And, I think the brashness and abrasiveness of Martin Luther, he was saying things that people had been saying about the Catholic Church for years, but when he said them, they got attention.
Yeah, and the church is full of history of people like that. There was Luther. Wesley was pretty controversial. Finney certainly was radical, and then William Booth, who started the Salvation Army. The Church of England basically gave him the left foot of fellowship.
I like that phrase, the left foot of fellowship. All right, well, we'll be back. We'll be right back on the Bob Siegel Show. Let me offer the left boot of fellowship to Jim Berrier.
Now, I'm just going to say something here. You're taking a big risk when you play music like that, Bob.
Because we're dating ourselves as two old baby boomers?
No, that was A Taste of Honey by Herb Alpert. But I was a teenager in those days, and when that album came out...
Oh, you're talking about the album cover, the girl covered with whipped cream.
Every teenage boy went out and bought that album.
Well, they had to use their imagination. She was completely covered with whipped cream, but I'll admit, I had never seen a record album quite like that.
Herb Alpert might get, called out for being sexist and for abusing women and all of that. And if you play his music on the show like that, you better be careful.
Well, since these days you'll be accused of something if you sneeze, and even more if you say "God bless you," because that violates separation between church and state. So, what can I say? I'll just take my risks. I
don't sneeze on any property that is occupied by governmental institutions, and then I'm okay. Can you give me a couple of minutes? I want to read something.
Absolutely.
I wrote this, and I thought you might like this. This is Cars Cause Problems. Cars cause problems. One, they cause pollution. Some people believe that cars cause global climate change. I don't, but at the very least, they make the air less pleasant to breathe, especially in Southern California. But in 1970, the EPA was created by Richard Nixon, of all people, and we knew then that something needed to change. But of course, not everyone makes sure that their car meets the legal requirements, and in nearly 50 years, the auto manufacturers by now could have come up with some real practical alternatives. But that would have cost a lot of money. And so things like electric cars and other alternate power resources are really a novelty for most Americans. And don't even get me started about lithium mining or what to do with dead lithium batteries and what that does to the environment. And then what about the deaths on the road? 40,000 Americans die every year in car accidents. That's over 100 people a day. If 100 people died in some incident, it would be big news. But cars kill 100 people a day. The top three causes of accidents are distracted driving, drunk driving, and speeding. I see people every day texting or talking on their phone or putting on makeup while they're driving. And people drink and drive and think nothing at all will happen. I once sat on a jury. It was in San Diego there. And a person was being charged with drunk driving. And the jury foreman says, "Hey, all of us have done it." I raised my hand and disagreed. Most people I know joke about driving over the speed limit. I'm guilty myself. Cars cause death. The average cost of a new car in America is $40,000. 7 million new cars are sold every year. That's $28 billion of debt. because nobody pays cash for a car. And then 12.6 of American drivers, that's 1 in 8, are uninsured, which is illegal, costing another $28 billion in damage every year. So, should we not outlaw cars?
Well, that's probably going to be the next thing to go, especially since terrorists are now using cars to plummet into people.
Oh, yeah, they drive them into crowds. So perhaps, though, obeying, enforcing, and then improving the laws that are already in existence is a better solution. Law without sanction is merely advice. And I've said that many times. Law without sanction is merely advice. By the way, I know that cars are not the cause of the problems. People who act irresponsibly and illegally, they're the cause of the problems. But if you notice there's a connection to that. There's a parallel on all, we're going to outlaw guns because look at all the damage guns do. And it's as ludicrous as saying that it's the cars themselves that are killing people. And if we didn't have cars, then we wouldn't have all these problems.
Well, and that guy that shot up that church in Texas was taken out by somebody with a gun.
Half of my congregation carries concealed, and the other half have criminal records, and so they can't carry a weapon.
That's your snapshot of San Antonio, Texas, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, yeah, and I have a very eclectic congregation, as you might well imagine. But I just think it's crazy, the rhetoric that people buy into, and I feel like Mr. Spock sometimes has logic completely abandoned the human race.
Hey, I'm glad you mentioned Mr. Spock because I have to confess you caused me to make my mind wander when you said don't get me started on mining lithium. Guess what that made me think of? Dilithium crystals. I'm thinking of Scott. I cannot get to the warp 3 because the dilithium crystals are recharging.
She's going to blow, sir. Scotty, you're a genius.
I love it. Yeah. My favorite scene from that show was when the Klingons picked a fight with Scotty on the bar in the episode The Trouble with Tribbles.
That was one of the most popular episodes, and it was one of my least favorite because it was just too darn cutesy.
But I just love it when the Klingons insulting Captain Kirk and Chekhov wants to punch him out, and he goes, "Take it easy, lad. We're man enough to take for you." Then the minute he starts insulting the Enterprise, you can see Scott just freezing. The beer comes halfway down his face. Oh my gosh!
Yeah, that's
I love that.
Yeah, that was I love that show, and I've liked I really love the original TV show. I've loved most of the films. I like the new cast that they've been using and the films they've produced. I enjoy that. I warned you folks, we take rabbit trails, and we just took one in hyperdrive.
A rabbit trail for Star Trek. It's just understood that that's permitted, though. That's just
I get it.
Just, an unwritten law around here.
Yeah, I love that stuff. So I don't even know where we were or where we're going.
Well, you were comparing cars with guns before I got us off on Star Trek.
Okay.
Although you mentioned Mr. Spock, you did give me the opening.
That's what it was. I knew there was something in there that was the segue.
All right. Well, you've got a reprieve to get your bearings and think about something genuinely religious or political when you come back on, Jim.
I'll try.
All right. We'll be right back. Listening to the Bob Siegel Show, joined today by my good friend from San Antonio, Texas, Jim Berrier.
Before we get into it, Bob, you did it again. When we went out to break, you played House of the Rising Sun, and you know what that song's about.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it is.
You're gonna, the
what would be the
delicate?
What would be the delicate description?
Well, I saw David Letterman once ask Eric Burden, now what was that song about? And he said, a bordello, which, half the audience didn't know what that word meant.
Yeah, so. It's a nicer word than or cat house, I guess. It is funny because sometimes my wife and I will listen to something and she'll just hate the lyrics. And I don't like the lyrics either. I mean, they might be well-written lyrics, but I may not like what the lyrics are singing about. And she'll say to me, how can you listen to that? When I fall in love with music, it's the tune. Yeah. A lot of times I don't even pay attention to the lyrics. It's the tune that will catch me. And if I like a tune, I will overlook a lot of lyrics. I mean, obviously, if it got super crazy, I'd have to pay some attention to the lyrics. But you got to love the Animals.
True. Oh, I do. I've seen Eric Burdon more than any other artist in my life. I've probably seen him 20 times. Solo, with the Animals, with War. He's one of my favorite performers. But and you know what? In recent years, because I always read between the lines and I pay attention, and he's gotten more and more spiritual over the years. And I think he, along with several of those guys, they realized they beat the odds. All their friends died from plane crashes and drug overdoses, and I think he's realizing how lucky he is. So he's he got hooked up with a woman a few years back, and I think she's got him kind of on the straight and narrow. So.
Yeah, I used to always say, if you're a rock star, be smart enough to not buy your own private plane. And if you're already a pilot, be smart enough not to become a rock star. Rock stars and private planes don't go together too well.
It's taken a lot of my favorites. So, just had to mention that. Now, you wanted me to talk about something religious and or political. I'm going to do it all in one thing. I mentioned to you a couple of weeks ago, I had the great honor of giving the invocation at the Justice Foundation.
Oh, yes, and you sent me a picture with you and Alveda King. That was so exciting. I was so happy for you. You know what? It was a great night. It was a great honor, and I had this unusual thing happen when they called and asked me to do that. And you know my story. I have a little bitty inner city church, and there's some big name pastors right here in our city. I could say their names, and your audience would know them all. And they didn't ask any of those guys to do it, and I was blown away. And so it was just a great honor. And then in the middle of the night, a couple of nights later, I woke up, and I have this prayer. I don't write prayers and read prayers. It's just not me to do that. But this one I did, and I got up and I wrote it all down, and it was so inspired, very prophetic. The word I would use. I used to be able to sit in the ministry of a guy named Leonard Ravenhill, and you may have heard of him or read some of his books, but I felt like the spirit of Leonard Ravenhill had landed on me, and it was a great opportunity for me. And even Alveda said, she complimented me about the prayer and stuff, and it was a great night. But what I want to say is, have you had her on your show? And if not, why not? Well, for one thing, my good friend Jim Berrier, who knows her personally, hasn't yet talked to her about coming on my show. Okay, we'll see what we can work out. Okay. Absolutely. She's a kick. Hey, you know who we did have, though? Last week we had the guy who from My Pillow was our guest. Okay. He's got a fantastic Christian testimony, actually. Well, so does she. And, that's basically what she did. She told her story, and she said, my daddy was a preacher, my granddaddy was a preacher, and my uncle was a very famous preacher. And she said, I grew up in church. I was in the choir, taught Sunday school, and I lived in church all my life, and I didn't know Jesus. And she tells the story. And she went to college, and people said, you need to stay away from that woman over there. She's a religious fanatic. And so, of course, Alveda, first thing she does is make a beeline and go over there and says, why shouldn't I talk to you? And she wound up getting saved, as we say, or becoming a believer, following Jesus, whatever language you want to use. And it was a 180 in her life, because she was a flaming liberal and going that whole route. And as the Lord started working in her and she started, kind of acquiring a different set of moral standards and spiritual insight, her political views changed. And now she's very controversial, because you tell me... Well, she defends Donald Trump, which is anathema. Let me ask you something, because these days black conservatives go through so much flack. You've been following what's been going on with Kanye West. And, does she get a special exception because she was related to Martin Luther King? Or do they drag her over the coals like they do with any other conservative African-American? Well, they do. And not only is she an African-American, she's a female. She's a woman. She's the niece of Martin Luther King. She's just not supposed to like somebody like Donald Trump. You know what? I don't know what Martin Luther King would say, but he was not... Oh, if he was alive today, he'd be disgusted with what's going on. He would be, by these self-proclaimed Martin Luther King wannabes like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton. Those guys aren't even fit to tie his shoe. No, and he might say, please don't associate me with what you're doing. But she is very controversial,
but I just love her, and she's funny, and she's really pretty humble.
Oh, I've seen her a lot, and I've been very impressed with her. I would be honored to have her on my show. Please drop a word to her.
We got to see if we can make that happen.
Oh, for sure. And if you would like to come on with her, you'd be more than welcome also.
I would probably just defer because she's got so much to say, and there is something about having the, if you will, the star power of the name. I mean, he's certainly one of the greatest icons of my generation, and but she was just a hoot, and very powerful testimony. And she's getting stuff done. She works with women and talks with people, and she's very, very proactive. She's not just talking; she's using her life to get stuff done. And so she's something. So I wanted that was my religious and political segue. How do you think?
Well, that's great. And while we're on that subject, what is your opinion of all that's going on with Conway West? And I forget the name of the woman from Turning Point, but she's just marvelous. The one that Kanye West came out and supported. It seems to me like there's just an upheaval going on in the African community. Have you listened to her? She is fantastic. She says, look, you guys are complaining about the Jim Crow laws and all these things that none of us went through, and you're whining about it more than the people that did go through it. And, oh, my goodness, she's taking on Black Lives Matter single-handedly. Yeah. I think we're going to see a lot of changes and paradigm shifts in this country.
I do, too.
All right. Well, hang with me for one more segment, my friend. We'll be right back. Well, Jim, as always, the time went far too fast. We're down to our last segment.
I know, and going out and coming in, you played music that must have been from movies, so I didn't know either of those.
Well, that was West Side Story coming in. And Going Out was actually from an Irish album called Celtic Portrait, so that one was not from a movie.
Well, I liked them both, and I'm embarrassed that I didn't recognize the West Side Story one because we've talked about that. So let me tell you what I'm getting ready to do, and this is a departure from what we usually do, but I'm just very excited. I head to the airport at dark 30 tomorrow morning to get on a plane. I'm going to fly to Paris to meet my wife, who has been there for a little over a week with our two daughters.
No kidding. Is this your first time to Paris?
Oh, no, I've been a couple of times. That's why I said, you go ahead and take the girls. And it's kind of cool. I asked Leslie what she wanted to do for her 60th birthday, which is this year, a couple of years ago, and she said, I'd really like to take Jamie and Leah to Paris. Now, that's an astounding thing. That's a wonderfully selfless act. And so they've been over there having a great time. So it's their first trip, really even off the continent, and so they're having a good time. And then Leslie got this idea, because now that she's retired, she just makes plans. And she said, how about when the girls are done, you fly over and meet us, and you and I can go to Italy. So we're going to go to Milan, Florence, and Venice.
Wow.
And it's going to be the Renaissance tour. I'm going to get to see some great works of art by Michelangelo and Da Vinci and many others, and I'm just very excited about that.
Well, congratulations. You deserve it. You work very hard at what you do. That sounds like an awesome trip.
I'm really looking forward to it. So I'm pretty jazzed about that, and of course, we're going to be gone for a while, and so I've been cramming, trying to get all the loose ends tied up and get a lot of work done.
How many weeks will you be away totally?
Well, we'll be gone almost 2 weeks, and then I come back, and we come home, wash our clothes, and repack, and we have to head to Washington, D.C., and I've mentioned this on a personal thing before, but Leslie's dad passed away several months ago, and he was a highly decorated Army colonel, and so his wishes would be to lay to rest at Arlington with full honors, which we're going to do.
Wow.
And I'll be officiating that. And I've been to one of those, and it's just absolutely overwhelming. It's so majestic. And so I've been working hard on that for the eulogy. And because it's military and because they do so much there, we have a chapel, and we have 20 minutes to be in and out. and then we march about 2 miles to the graveside, and then I have 10 minutes to do the graveside service. So, and you know how hard it is for me to not ramble. So I'm going to have to read again the services because I can't get outside of that time frame. But I'm really excited about it. It is kind of bittersweet because we're saying goodbye to her dad.
Yeah, but it's also a great honor, and
it's a great honor. And he was 85, and he was, to me, he was a hero. He won quite a few really high awards, and we're going to talk about that. But so I will be gone.
And you didn't have to share them with Kim Jong-il.
You know, now I'm just going to say, a guy who served in the Army for 20 years, did 2 tours of Vietnam. He was pretty conservative politically, I'll just say that. And he would not mince words about things. So
those were in the days before the military became a social experiment.
Oh, he would have, he'd be so, he was, recent years, he was just so disgusted with some of the stuff going on. But so I'm going to be basically out of town for almost, at least 3 weeks out of the month of May. So I will get with you. We'll schedule whenever I can come on next month, but it's probably going to have to be very late in the month. So.
Okay, yeah, I was about to say, Jim, are you building up to the fact that you won't be on with us during the month of May?
Perish the thought, my friend.
Yeah. Well, we can always just have you call in from Paris. I mean, if you can,
that would
call from San Antonio, you can call from Paris.
Yeah, well, and we'll actually be in Italy, maybe from Venice on a gondola.
Depends on what kind of phone you had. Last week, our guest called in from Israel. So,
yeah. Well, Leslie, who is just a wonderful at the travel agent thing and getting everything, she got separate accounts with ATM cards we can use in Europe. And she's got things hooked up with our phone service, so we can use our phones while we're over there. So she's just really great at organizing all of that. And by the way, I want to say something about Dana's comment about Bob finally moving into the 21st century. Wow.
Yeah, before it became the 22nd century.
Yeah, I'm going to have to talk to that girl. I read your books. I have some of them e-books, but I have the So You Want to Believe book and actually in hard copy. I still prefer a real book. I like to be able to turn
do
the
too.
page.
I sell them as ebooks also because we need to, but I get so much more excited when the print copies sell than when somebody downloads an ebook. I
still use a Strong's exhaustive concordance to look stuff up.
Well, now here's where I have stepped in because I have a fantastic library in my office, but because of the internet, I barely ever need to use it anymore because you really can't find anything on Strong's by just typing in a quick Google search. So see, folks, I've stepped on. I'm on the. Who says I'm not on the internet?
Actually, the show is on the internet. So,
well, there you go. The show's on my website. Yeah, no, I practically live on the internet. But things like Kindle books, and I still like collections. And I know now you can get any movie on Netflix, but I like my DVD collection. I like my book. I do too. I grew up in the age of collections. I don't want everything in the world to be on one little device no bigger than the palm of our hand.
Bob, I still have vinyl.
Hey, vinyl's been making a comeback. I go into Barnes & Noble. They're selling vinyl albums all over the place in there.
No, I have old original stuff, but...
Oh, I do too. Anyway, I still have an old vinyl collection somewhere. I could probably make a mint off eBay with it.
Tonight's theme, folks, is Bob and Jim dating themselves by references in pop culture.
The whole theme of our show is Christianity and its relationship to politics and pop cultures. We've often done all pop culture shows. It's just that when you're on, we kind of do everything at one time.
And I love that. I really love that. This is so much fun for me. So no, I will not miss next month. We just have to figure out what.
All right, we'll get you on by hook or by crook. We'll tentatively maybe think last Sunday of May, but whatever works for you.
Okie doke.
All right, my friend. Well, you have a wonderful time and say hello to your wife for me. And
Thank you so much.
Have a blessed time there and a blessed time at Arlington as well. That's a great honor.
Thanks, friend.
All right. Talk to you later. We'll see you next week, everybody.